What's up everyone, it's Dakota and welcome back to another modern video. And this week we're going to be taking a look at a deck that Corey Baumeister and Ross Merriam, both players of Team BCW, um, took to the SCGCon 20K event in Columbus this past weekend and both managed to make the top four. Both playing the same deck, some with slight variations and stuff, but very interesting nonetheless. It's the deck that I kind of went over back in March when this deck was kind of hanging around. Like, it was kind of cool. People didn't really play with it too much because they've been playing with like 4-color control, Murktide Hammer, all that fun stuff. So today we're going to be taking a look at it, seeing what kind of changes have been made to the deck, and why all of a sudden this deck is kind of taken over Modern, at least in my eyes, with some pretty good players picking it up. So without further ado, let's go ahead and take a look at the Jeskai Breach deck for the Modern format. So here we have the Jeskai Breach deck. We're going to be looking at Ross Merriam's deck list for this video. I kind of looked at some of the differences between his and Corey Baumeister's deck, which Corey Baumeister has been the one that has been kind of pushing the deck a lot, like on social media and stuff like that. So, both that being said, we'll look at Ross, who ended up actually winning the event. But before we get too deep into that, I just want to say thank you to everyone that subscribed and showed some support to the channel. And if you're not subscribed and you are watching this video, what the heck are you waiting for? Go ahead and subscribe and ring the notification bell if you want to get notifications for videos such as this, other types of modern and pioneer content as well as trying to get some gameplay mixed in here and there of some of your favorite modern decks and pioneer decks. Also, feel free to join the Discord that is linked in the description of this video, which is kind of a fun place to hang out, toss around deck ideas, and things like that. With that being said, let's go ahead and take a look at Jeskai Breach, what the deck is trying to accomplish. So the deck is kind of weird in the way that it kind of operates. So it gets the breach part of it from the card Underworld Breach. Underworld Breach says that non-land cards in your graveyard has escape. Their escape cost is equal to their mana cost, plus exiling 3 other cards from your graveyard. And at the beginning of your end step, you sacrifice Underworld Breach. Usually, the turn that you play Underworld Breach, you're going to try and win the game. So um, you have cards like Grinding Station, which is kind of like the big thing that you want because you tap it, sacrifice an artifact. A player puts the top 3 cards of their library into their graveyard, and whenever an artifact comes into play, you untap Grinding Station. So really quickly, if you have like a Mox Amber, you have Grinding Station, and you have Underworld Breach, you're essentially going to be able to mill your entire deck with Mox Amber. And if you have like a Emery in play, or if you have like a Ragavan, you're able to generate mana every time you go through that loop. Um, Emery being the most important one because you can eventually just mill through your deck, mill yourself out, or just end up milling your opponent depending on the amount of artifacts stuff you play. But generally, you're just going to mill yourself, and then you play a Thassa's Oracle and win the game that way. This deck also has in this deck in particular, kind of has like a backup game plan of just like beating down your opponent. There is one Dragon Rage Channeler that can surveil whenever you cast a non-creature spell. Obviously being triggered by these 25 spells that we have here. Can also just become a 3/3 attack each turn. Can get aggressive and kind of put pressure on your opponent that way. Ragavan, the format is essentially warped around either playing this card or killing it on turn 1, but it's just so good to not play. You also just generate tons of mana and allows your Mox Ambers to add red mana as well. Just a very good card. Obviously, appropriately rated and definitely worth playing 4 of in this deck. Ledger Shredder. You have some of these free and super cheap like artifacts and things like that, where even if you don't trigger Ledger Shredder on turn 2, on turn 3 you are very likely to cast 2 spells and then just keep conniving through your deck, trying to find like your Thassa's Oracle or find like an Emery and whatnot. Also, this card could just win the game on its own as well. Emery, kind of, I mean, this card, it basically speaks for itself. It was a staple in the like Oko, like Urza, like time of Modern before Oko really got banned and before Astrolabe got hit. This spell costs 1 less to cast for each artifact you control. When it enters the battlefield, you mill 4 cards, and then you can tap it and choose an artifact in your graveyard, and you can cast that card this turn. Allows you to get back any one of your spells, like just getting to recur Mishra's Bauble every turn, and essentially draw a card every turn. Is definitely I think underappreciated. It was definitely really good in its time, a few years ago. and I still think it's pretty good now, considering the information and like the tricks you can do with like Mishra's Bauble and things like that. Of course, getting back like Mox Amber, just essentially getting to tap Emery for like mana, maybe get some of your combo going. Getting back like Springleaf Drum or getting the namesake card like Grinding Station to just kind of get things going as well. Um, so that does it for the creatures. They obviously have like their place. Thassa's Oracle obviously being the most important because this is how you're more than likely going to win the game. Of note, while I am here on Thassa's Oracle, if you have no cards in your library and your opponent kills the Thassa's Oracle and you have no other blue devotion, you still win the game because your library is equal to your devotion, 0. So you can end up winning the game still. So as long as you have Thassa's Oracle's trigger on the stack and that trigger resolves and you have no cards in your library, you do get to win the game. It's only in the off chance that you have like 1 or 2 cards in your library that if your opponent kills Thassa's Oracle, things get super awkward for you. Some of the other spells, Expressive Iteration, the best cantrip in Modern, followed by Unholy Heat, probably one of the best removal spells to play in the format as well. The fact that for 1 mana you get to deal 6 damage to a creature or a planeswalker is really all the interaction you need, while Iteration just digs 3 cards deep. Hits hopefully any one of your like Mox Ambers or Mishra's Baubles that you can cast for free. Picking up obviously one of like your important pieces like Breach, Grinding Station, or Emery, and just getting rid of some extra junk like lands or maybe an extra like copy of Ragavan that you don't need. Uh, Finally, the artifacts, kind of went over these, going over Emery. Mishra's Bauble, there's so many tricks to this card. Again, worth having like its own video, but as far as like setting up like your own draw steps, knowing what your opponent's going to play, um, and things like that, on top of just getting to draw extra cards in the worst case with like Emery in play, if there's not any better artifacts or not a way to get started. Mishra's Bauble just does a lot for 0 mana, and it's definitely worth 4 of, and really surprised that more decks just like don't play this. Mox Amber, this is one of the differences in Ross's list and Corey's list, and I guess I should have went over in the creatures as well. In Corey Baumeister's list, he is playing 2 Mox Amber instead of 3, and he is not playing this Dragon Rage Channeler, and he is playing 2 Teferi Time Raveler in the main board, where Ross is playing it in the sideboard. Just a quick side note, but Mox Amber only getting to add mana of any color if you control a legendary creature or planeswalker. Uh, so doesn't get to add mana like say some of the other Moxes do, but Mox Amber does get to add mana, and obviously is an important part of the Underworld Breach Grinding Station like combo. Just eventually getting to cast things. Really, you could do this Underworld Breach thing with like any 0 mana thing. You just need to be able to sacrifice it with Grinding Station, so you won't get to like draw a ton of cards with like Mishra's Bauble per se, but it is a way that like eventually you could just like find a Mox Amber, and then if you have like an Emery in play, just continue to add mana till you can cast the Thassa's Oracle. An Aether Spellbomb, you are playing Urza Sagas, so you can get any of these cards. So Aether Spellbomb can bounce a creature, also can just like cantrip as well. So there's another like artifact that, even though with like a little bit more mana investment, you do get to just like can just draw a card off of it. 1 Springleaf Drum, your random creatures can just tap to add mana. You do, if you can, like ramp in a way, like playing like a turn 1 Ragavan, and then you just getting to make like treasures off of it. You can just like turbo out like a turn 3 win. That is very possible. I don't know. I think there might be like a theoretical like turn 2 win. I didn't really think about it too hard, but I imagine like turn 3 is like very doable. Turn 4 at the very worst. And just like Springleaf Drum is like another way that you can do that. Plus, it's another card that you can get from Urza Saga. So that's the spells in the deck. The lands, trying to enable this hot, beautiful mess that we have going on over here. 4 Urza Sagas are like the headliner land of this deck. Just the fact that like you do have all these like cheap artifacts and stuff. You aren't playing Shadow Spear, so you're not going to like just trample over and gain like a ton of life. But nonetheless, making like 4 and 5 power constructs while also getting like a Mox Amber off of this to hopefully get your combo going is pretty sweet and definitely worth playing it. And a deck where you could play Urza Saga on like turn 1, and it's honestly not the absolute worst thing you can do, where like some decks wants to wait until turn 2 to play this card so they can actually make 2 constructs with the life of Urza Saga. Um, Aside from that, like you have Otawara, bounces artifact, creature, enchantment, or planeswalker. Basically a staple of like blue-based decks, a land that they just want to like throw in, just to have that flexibility of being able to get rid of things. And you're playing like a decent amount of legendary creatures to where you could feasibly get this down to like 2 mana, which is pretty good for its effect, I think. The rest of it, some fetch lands, Arid Mesa, Flooded Strand, and you got Scalding Tarns as well to kind of pick up like your Hollowed Fountain, Mountain Island, Sacred Foundry, and Steam Vents. The only non-fetchable land that is not Otawara or Urza is the 2 Spire Bluff Canals. And of course, as you can see, you're essentially a base blue-red deck in the main deck with some white cards in the sideboard to kind of shore up some other matchups. Sideboard, looking to opt for like engineer explosives. Notably, cannot get this with Urza Saga. Obviously, it would be kind of better like in the Rhinos matchups if you could do that, or like things like that, but not good in this case. Tormod's Crypt is searchable off of Urza Saga. Deals with like some of the artifact, or some of the artifact, deals with some of the like graveyard-based decks for cheap. Also gets to be an artifact, so Emery can get it back on the earlier turns if needed. Pithing Needle, a card that people were super excited about when Urza Saga came out because your opponent has to respond to the third chapter of Urza Saga, because if they let it resolve, then you can needle something for free. Of course, outside of that, just Needle being a very good card for some annoying planeswalkers and stuff. Karn can be a problem, so at least like Pithing Needle can stop like the Karn onslaught, and hopefully can follow it up by like killing it with like unholy heats and things like that. Just a very versatile card in a lot of matchups that you want this in. 2 Prismatic Ending, this being like part of the white splash, as we can see from like Teferi Time Raveler and Wear and Tear. Prismatic Ending, just getting to deal with a non-land permanent equal to the number of colors that were spent to cast it. Of course, you are just in your land, you're playing like 3 colors, but like Springleaf Drum and the treasures that like Ragavan makes can get this up to like 4 or 5. I don't know if there's any like 4 and 5 things besides like Karn for sure, is a 4 cost thing that you can get. Where that's going to be relevant to like having a 4th color, but Prismatic Ending can be super cheap, very flexible, and just being like a 1 mana get rid of 1, 2 mana for 2, so on and so forth. And just works very well in your favor on rate. There is a Shadow Spear if you really need to get aggressive with some of your creatures. Like realistically, like throwing a Shadow Spear on like a Ledger Shredder that has connived twice and gotten counters put on it carries the Shadow Spear very well, and just having an 8-point life swing every turn with Ledger Shredder is not nothing. Even slapping this on like a Dragon Rage Channeler makes it very threatening, especially when it's already enraged. Soul Guide Lantern, the last of the artifacts that we can get with Urza Saga off of its trigger. Uh, you can just play it and it'll get rid of a card from your opponent's graveyard, and of course it has the option of being able to sack itself for 1 mana and tapping it to draw a card, or just getting rid of each opponent's graveyard just by tapping and sacrificing it. Just seems to be one of the cards that people look to play for in terms of like graveyard hate for modern. This used to be kind of occupied by Relic of Progenitus because it would just exile all graveyards, but the fact that the graveyard exiling effect is all opponents and not all players, it kind of gets a nod over that card for the fact that even in this deck in particular, like you definitely want and need your graveyard. So Soul Guide Lantern is definitely a plus over Relic. Um, Rounding out the sideboard slots, Aether Gust, of course, like getting rid of countering target, or not even countering it. You choose target spell or permanent that's red or green, and then the owner puts it on top or bottom of their library. It gets to stop uncast or uncounterable Titans because it doesn't technically counter it. Just puts it on top or bottom, more than likely on top because they're filthy Titan players. Even like some of the scape shift decks are starting to like come back in like full force, so like this, or even like some of the Rhino decks and things like that. You definitely have options with Aether Gust, and the fact that it's not a counter spell but just like a way of like circumventing being countered worth a slot in this blue base deck. Teferi Time Raveler, It kind of pulls double duty. So Time Raveler stops the Cascade decks, notably the Living End and Rhino's deck, for the fact that your opponent can only cast spells anytime they cast a sorcery, and technically Cascade puts it on the stack on top of another spell, so they can't cast it. Also stops cards that are suspended from being casted. And of course, the plus, like Expressive Iteration is already a very good card. When played at sorcery speed. It's even better when it's played at instant speed. So Teferi Time Raveler kind of has the upside, and it also just gets to cantrip by drawing a card for bouncing an artifact, creature, or enchantment its owner's control. Um, there is like some world where like you can use Teferi Time Raveler to kind of like save one of your cards. Um, you could play like an Underworld Breach and have like a Teferi Time Raveler in play. It gets to do things, and if you fail to go off, you can bounce your Underworld Breach before you have to sacrifice it, draw a card, have the potential to go for it next turn, and things like that. Just some of the things that you can do with Teferi Time Raveler. Finally, a Wear and Tear. It is a art of just a shatter and a erase essentially on one card. You can cast both hats of it. Pretty dang good in my book. Just kind of like been a staple since it was printed back in like Return to Ravnica block. So yeah, that is the Jeskai Breach for Modern. Again, deck piloted by Ross Merriam is the list that we're looking at. Also played by Corey Baumeister. Both amazing content creators. Definitely love watching them play on Versus Live when that was a thing, and just kind of seeing how like their careers and Magic and stuff are like still playing at a very high level. This was a 20K at the SCG Con in Columbus, and they both made top four. That is absolutely amazing, and all the while doing it with a deck that people really haven't seen. I mean, you can see on the side here, that in the NRG 5K trial, Is It Breach did end up winning that event, but only putting up a 64th and a 190th finish in that tournament as well. Second place in an RCQ 11th. So like this deck does have a little bit of results, but definitely not the volume that some of the other top decks in the format have. So I think Jeskai Breach definitely going forward is going to be an interesting deck to watch as kind of like the metagame unfolds. Uh, in one of Corey Baumeister's posts, he said that he doesn't expect Dominaria United to change much of anything for the modern format, so he still is very high on Jeskai Breach. So definitely a deck that if you want to try something new for the format, and it is a combo deck, but it's this it's kind of like a combo deck that I like. I'm a big fan of like Underworld Breach. I absolutely love that card back from the Hidden Strings Lotus Field combo deck from like Pioneer. So the fact that it has a home in Modern in a deck that seems like it can be relatively well positioned in the format is awesome. And I implore you to try this strategy out for yourself and just kind of get a feel for it, because I think the deck does look like it's a lot of fun. But that's going to do it for me in this video. I hope you all enjoyed. If you did, please leave a like. And if you're not already subscribed to the channel, consider subscribing and ring the notification bell as well, so you know when videos like this and other videos go up as well. Be sure to join the Discord server. The link is in the description of this video. Um, Again, feel free to leave deck suggestions, cards that you like in the formats, and things like that. Definitely open for discussion over on that forum. But yeah, that's going to do it for me in this video. I hope you all enjoyed, and I hope to see you all in the next one.